Hello, I'm Dr. James Thomas. Mind the gap is something that you'll hear if you've ever been on an urban transit, particularly the London Underground. Every time a train pulls into the station, the conductor inside the train and outside, there's an announcement that says, please mind the gap. That's because your mind is focused on getting to work, finding out where you're going to sit, getting on the train, and you're ignoring something that's very essential, and they want to refocus your mind on that gap. That little gap is where all the action takes place between the train and the platform, and if you get your toe stuck in it or you drop your keys through it, well, there's a lot going on and a lot could happen. The same is true with the vocal cords. When we look at a picture of the larynx, we're going to see a lot of activity, and our mind may be distracted by all of that movement. But if we want to come up with a diagnosis, we're going to want to focus our mind on the gap. I'm going to go through here and define what voice is, and I'm going to ask you to listen to three voices. There are three women. We're going to hear them do a reading, and let's compare what we hear.
Long ago, men found that it was easier to travel on water than on land.
Long ago, men found it was easier to travel on water than
Long ago, men found it was easier to travel by water than by land.
Okay, we heard three voices, and we can ask, what is voice? Voice is generated by anything that vibrates. And in these three women, one of them had a set of vocal cords and the other two didn't. But you don't have to have vocal cords to make a voice. A violin has a voice, a piano has a voice, a guitar has a voice. We recognize their voice, and that's because anytime something vibrates, it generates a voice. In the first lady, it was her vocal cords. In the second lady, it was an electrolarynx, a buzzer placed on her neck. And in the third lady, she was regurgitating air up through her esophagus, and the walls of the esophagus were vibrating. So they all had a voice, even though two of them had lost their voice box. We know that voice is generated by anything that vibrates, and the corollary of this statement is that voice is only generated by something that vibrates. So if we're focusing in on the vocal cords, in a way, we can ignore everything else that's going on in terms of diagnosing a voice problem. So here's a set of vocal cords. We're looking down from above. The vocal cords are the two structures in the middle. Front is at the bottom and back is at the top. And let's take a look at them vibrating. And we notice it's only the edges of the vocal cords that vibrate. So in fact, if we could filter our eyes out and ignore everything around there, we're going to find that when there's a voice problem, it occurs in this center section. Now, we know what voice is. What's hoarseness?
Long ago, men found that it was easier to travel on water than on land.
We sort of recognize it when we hear it. There's something wrong with that woman's voice. It's hoarse.
Long ago, men found that it was easier to travel on water than on land.
And there's something that's the matter with his voice. And we all recognize it as hoarseness. So how can we define what was wrong with each of their voices? I would like to say that there's two definitions, or there's two kinds of hoarseness. The first is the unwanted leak of air. Let's take a listen to the leaking sound. We have a hee where air is coming out unintentionally, and that's one type of hoarseness. Or the second type of hoarseness is the irregular leak of air, where we're actually hearing two sounds at once and it sounds rough. The unwanted leak of air occurs whenever there's a gap or an opening between the vocal cords. The black area in between the vocal cords is where air can leak out. And I would like to call this a husky hoarseness. We hear the air leak. Husky hoarseness is a generic term for this. The technical term we would call this is white noise. And an example of pure white noise would be a whisper when we don't bring the vocal cords together at all.
Let's see. Hello. Oui, mademoiselle.
The person intentionally holds the vocal cords slightly apart, and that's not hoarseness, but that's a whisper, and a whisper is white noise or turbulent airflow. Now, the irregular leak of air is due to some asymmetry, some difference between vibrating segments. So we hear this quality, and what we're really hearing is two pitches at once. We could call this a rough hoarseness. The technical term for this would be diplophonia. We're hearing two pitches, diplophonia, two pitches at once. Well, why do I think this is important? Well, this is a brochure that came out recently, and it's something that I hear way too often, and that is people who go in to the doctor and they come away with a pill because they're told they have reflux. And right away when we look at this brochure, we can see that it's pointing to two areas of the larynx that don't vibrate. We already learned that if you have a voice problem, it has to occur along the vocal cords. So, voice is vibration, hoarseness is either air leak, or two pitches at once, or a combination of the two. If something is not on the edge of the vocal cord, we don't need to pay attention to it in terms of hoarseness.